What you are seeing on your screen right now is an email from a Slate journalist named April Glaser. For those that are listening on the podcast, I'll just be describing what we're showing. This email, in my opinion, shows the tactic of activists in media to deplatform their political rivals through loaded questions and language meant to create maximum pressure and increase the cost of businesses to work with certain political groups. I will make a few caveats. I wrestled with publishing the name of the journalist. I initially had redacted her name from the piece. However, it's extremely important to see articles she's written and tweets she made that show she is in favor of deplatforming. And in one article, I believe it shows it was her intention the whole time to get the Proud Boys shut down from their financial services. I believe it was intentional. Now, that's just my opinion. I'm speculating. We can go through this email, and I will explain to you exactly why I believe that to be the case. I also want to talk about the ultimate ramifications of this behavior, the destruction of journalism, and how these activists are harming the intellectual and academic communities. Following the Vox adpocalypse, we've seen many history channels, teachers, journalists get their accounts restricted, shut down, banned, etc. Demonetized, I should say that instead of banning. This email, actually, let me do this. For those that aren't familiar, Enrique Tarrio is the chairman, I believe he's the chairman of the Proud Boys. He received a notification that his Chase financial service, the processing portion, and his personal account would be shut down. That's my understanding after talking and looking over some of the data and information. I spoke with Enrique Tarrio to get comment on the story, and he said that he believes it was on the 1st of February. That would mean this email from Slate came in a day before he got notified his account would be shut down, his Chase payment tech. Now that you understand that, we'll go through the relevant information, but we'll start with the email. April Glaser of Slate.com wrote this to three different email addresses at JP Morgan, two at JP Morgan, one at Chase, titled Slate Inquiry, Providing Service for the Proud Boys. Hi there. I'm April, a journalist at Slate, writing to ask if JP Morgan Chase is aware that the Proud Boys affiliated online store, 1776.shop, uses Chase payment tech as its payment processor. 1776.shop is what's redirected from fundthewest.org, which Proud Boys founder Gavin McInnes cited as the legal defense fund of the Proud Boys. The Proud Boys are designated by the Southern Poverty Law Center as a hate group, and members have engaged in group violence in Portland and New York City. The group has been suspended by Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Is the usage of Chase payment tech in support of such groups against Chase's policy? On a deadline, many thanks, April. First, I shouldn't have to say this, but I will. I actually oppose the politics of the Proud Boys to a rather great degree. In fact, to their faces, I have told them one of the things they say is that they refuse to apologize for the West. And when they asked me, I said, absolutely not. I will apologize for the West. It doesn't mean the West is bad, but I do believe there are things that we've done wrong in the growth of this country, in the United States, expansion, militarism, imperialism, that absolutely should be held accountable and apologize for it. I don't agree with them on traditional politics, traditionalism, etc. I shouldn't have to say it, but I will. But now let's point out a few things. First, the email to me is my understanding, having actually worked with some activist groups and been involved with stuff, years and years ago, working at nonprofits, etc., is we're seeing a lot of framing tactics here that show that say to me, the intention of this email is not for a story. It's to debank, to deplatform individuals this person doesn't like. A cursory glance of April Glaser's Twitter feed and things she said make me believe she is absolutely at odds with the Proud Boys, having made some comments that may be considered passively disparaging to certain figures on the right. We'll go through in a second. Here's the thing. I'm curious as to what April's story was going to be. The story that she could have written off of this would probably be something to do with JP Morgan Chase provides processing service for a Proud Boy affiliated store. Personally, whether or not that's newsworthy, I believe is up to the writer. It may be in certain activist circles, maybe in smaller markets. I don't think it's necessarily newsworthy on its own, but that's just my personal opinion. You absolutely could believe it's newsworthy to know that Chase, that the Proud Boys sell bracelets and t-shirts and Chase processes their payments. It's important to note, additionally, that Square and PayPal also severed financial services to the Proud Boys around the same time. There's some interesting things I'll point out before moving on. writing to ask if JP Morgan Chase is aware that the Proud Boys affiliated store uses Chase Payment Tech. Right. But she ends by saying, is the usage of Chase Payment Tech in support of such groups against Chase's policies on a deadline? This is an important thing to contrast. If she's asking if they're aware, she's under the impression it's possible they are not, in which case they would not be acting in support of such groups. I believe it would be absurd to imply that Chase manually individually investigates every client they've ever had to what groups they're affiliated with, etc. On a deadline, that's essentially fair. A lot of people are often on deadlines. However, the story she wrote didn't come out till 7 days later, after the Proud Boys were already banned. This story, The Swag Shop of the Far Right, came out February 7th. The email was sent on January 31st. I should have pointed this out at the beginning, but I'm going to get to it now. There's a lot of information to go through. I reached out to Chase because I've actually received many other documents that paint a rather disconcerting picture. However, Chase could not confirm or deny the existence of the additional documents. However, through on two different circumstances, Chase confirmed to me the authenticity of this email. In my conversation with Slate, they made reference to the contents of the email, but did not directly confirm. However, in my opinion, based on what they said about what's in the email, I believe they understand what the email is and that it, in fact, does exist. But more importantly, Chase told me twice, yes, they found this email, and then again said, I thought we already confirmed this for you, see the previous thread, essentially. So the questions I had, I reached out to Slate for a response. We've had a back and forth, an interesting kind of argument for some reason, where they absolutely pushed back on me referring to April Glaser as an activist, though I think that's an opinion. She very well may be an activist and a reporter. That's fine. They have not yet gotten me an official comment, so I will follow up with their official comment. But the things I would ask is, if you're on a deadline, why would the story not come out for a week? Were they really intending on writing a story letting us know that Chase provides processing services for the online shop of the Proud Boys? Maybe. It also could be that they were, and then as soon as they got news that Enrique Tarrio, chairman of the Proud Boys, was being banned, they decided to wait on the story and then publish in greater detail. It appears that in the story from April Glaser, she did receive, there may have been direct communication with some of the other financial services. Let me see if I can pull this up. They say, 1776, an e-commerce site that appears to support the group, remains functional, or it did. Last week, the payment processing company Square pulled its service from 1776, a source close to the move confirmed to Slate. That would, if that happened about a week before, that leads me to believe she made contact to other organizations, Square and PayPal, around the same time, which would make sense. She says, and while a spokeswoman said Square does not comment on individual accounts, she wrote in a statement, Square does not tolerate our products or our platform being used for hate. When we determine accounts violate our terms of service, we take swift action. She goes on to write that JP Morgan Chase's Chase Payment Tech also previously provided payment processing services for the 1776.shop, and a source close to the decision confirmed it had stopped. By Tuesday of this week, the site had switched to a PayPal button. PayPal then yanked the account used on 1776.shop. A source close to the decision said, not the first time PayPal has pulled the plug on Proud Boys affiliated accounts. As of publication, 1776 once again has a field for shoppers to enter a credit card number, but it's unclear if it works or if any vendor is powering it. I want to stress right now as well, there are many activist organizations that have been scouring the code, the visible code of that website to find who they use for payment processing. I don't believe, in my opinion, it's coincidental that around the exact same time as this story, activists are pulling off the same thing. I think it's fair to point out April Glaser is absolutely an activist. We can see that from this image that was posted by Big League Politics from Henry Tarrio, who I believe that's Enrique. He received this it was dated February 4th. I spoke to Enrique, who said that he received word, he believes on the 1st, that his Chase Payment Tech would be shut down. And then shortly later, they informed him his personal account would be shut down. It is my opinion, based on the email in question, the intention of April Glaser was to get him taken down, either because it's political, which I believe overtly political, or also because it helped produce the story that she then wrote later, where she says Chase pulled their services. Now, I do want to highlight some other issues that show, in my opinion, again, April Glaser absolutely is not a journalist. At least, at the very least, you could call her an advocacy journalist, an activist. Activist makes the most sense for several reasons. I believe the email she sent was designed to cleverly put pressure on the company. I would personally consider that a threat if someone sent me that. The implication being that we are going to write a negative story about you, and we're on a deadline, and you support this group. That's all very, very negative. I have been on the end of stories that are like this, and it tends to function the same way. However, yesterday, April Glaser wrote this story: bring back the golden age of broadcast regulation, especially for YouTube and Facebook. She is directly advocating for the bringing back of old school regulation that restricted certain speech. At the end of the story, she says, protecting the safety of their users will always come second. That's where laws are supposed to come in. It's time we got some. Now, you could argue that she's not talking about speech regulation or deplatforming. However, she tweeted this earlier this morning at 11:26 a.m. in a thread she made starting 2 days ago. She said, I made a thread which totally isn't my style, but a lot of chatter now about what to do about regulating tech platforms ignores the fascinating history of broadcast law, which I happened to have studied. Freedom of speech isn't the same as the freedom to broadcast and amplify that speech. I wrote about how public interest obligations over U.S. broadcasters work and why it's such a useful frame when thinking about social media regulation. She followed up at 11:26 by saying, this is not about regulating content. It's about the possibility of potentially reporting efforts to combat misinformation, data privacy, and yes, not allowing hate speech to be broadcast to large audiences. There's not I wouldn't say it's a direct tie-in to the email in question that she sent, but I believe, in my opinion, this shows she believes in deplatforming, restricting the speech of certain groups. And I believe this is an example of her advocating for deplatforming and restriction of speech. Now, another issue that's really important is whether or not you want to follow my speculation here. It's possible she was legitimately asking Chase and all of those things. That's fine. I personally believe it's an activist tactic because I've seen this employed by activists at organizations, having been a director at several organizations, having been active in hacktivist circles several years ago. It all follows an activist framework. What she did in the email was she made a loaded implication that Chase supports the Proud Boys. She highlighted information from the Proud Boys that comes from a third-party organization with no authority. The Southern Poverty Law Center's opinion on the Proud Boys is irrelevant by any journalistic standard unless you're trying to generate a specific outcome. She goes on to say that they've engaged in group violence, again, out of context, and provides nothing but harm to the narrative. It's a negative narrative. If she didn't include this and simply asked about the Proud Boys, that potentially would have been fine. If she wanted to understand if Chase provided services to controversial political groups, I could understand that. However, by using the Southern Poverty Law Center and by saying they engaged in violence, these are out of context, third-party, non-governmental opinion. I believe the intention was specifically to force Chase into shutting down the Proud Boys. I would also point out that the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI, according to The Independent, have referred to Antifa as domestic terrorists. She could inversely frame the story that the Proud Boys are known to engage in violence combating known terrorist groups. I believe that characterization would be completely absurd and that it falls outside the realm of journalism. I would also like to point out that I believe this is a direct violation of at least two journalistic ethics. As we've seen, April Glaser has advocated against hate speech. I believe, and based on her Twitter thread and the things she stated, her politics fall opposed to the Proud Boys, in which case there is a potential conflict of interest up for interpretation, but also she is not minimizing harm by targeting a shop to which she knows is run by Henry Tarrio as an individual. In her story, she says that the business is registered to Henry Tarrio, who may be the same person as Enrique Tarrio. If she knew that before reaching out to Chase, I believe it's a violation of the minimization of harm because she is targeting a private individual. She absolutely can tell the story about the Proud Boys without directly referring to his small business, in which case Enrique Tarrio has broken no laws. I believe it is fair to point out the Proud Boys are not a criminal organization. They are controversial. I do not agree with their opinions. There are certain things they've done in terms of getting arrested in which individuals have been charged for violence. The organization itself, you can criticize them all you want, but I don't believe they have any governmental scrutiny to the extent that Antifa does. But again, all that's an opinion. I personally believe that by targeting the business of a private individual associated with the Proud Boys, she has overstepped the bounds of minimization of harm. That's just my opinion. If you want to argue journalistic ethics, you're free to do so. I'm not saying I'm completely right. But more to the point, upon the tweeting of when April Glaser said, yes, it's about not allowing hate speech to be broadcast to large audiences, I sent the tweet in question to Slate, and sure enough, April Glaser deleted the tweet. So I will copy the link to tweet. I will open a new tab, paste the link in, and we can see the page no longer exists. However, I did archive it. She followed up that tweet by adding, she says it's about, and yes, not allowing hate speech to be broadcast to large audiences, and about acknowledging the reality of concentrated media power and protecting the role of information infrastructure in a democratic society. So for whatever reason, she deleted the tweet. Slate told me they did not instruct her to do so, and went on to say they believe the tweet in question has nothing to do with what we're talking about. I disagree. I believe this email shows that she believes in restricting speech that she deems to be hateful. So I do want to now branch off from here. I think I've hit as much as I possibly can in this capacity. There's a tactic used among the media to, if they're trying to generate news, what they'll do is they'll send a request that's loaded that forces a company to take action, wait until the action is taken, and then they'll write the story. The example I often cite is Maffick Media. Maffick Media is a left-wing anti-war media organization. They were suspended by Facebook after CNN reached out to Facebook, asking why Facebook, I don't know exactly what CNN asked, but they said that that Maffick Media is funded by Russia. I believe it's owned 51% by Ruptly, which is funded by Russia Today. But that's not against the rules. However, CNN reached out to Facebook. Facebook then suspended Maffick Media. And then after the suspension, CNN wrote a story saying, Facebook had suspended this group. It's a common tactic among low-tier, journalists just trying to get that article to trigger the story themselves, which is another violation of journalistic ethics, imposing their will to make something happen so they can report it. Reminds me of, if you've seen the movie Bruce Almighty, where it becomes Mr. Exclusive. If you're not familiar, the guy gets God powers and then makes the news happen. That is a serious violation of journalistic ethics. So what I want to highlight beyond this is, essentially just there it is. That's the email in question. Let me know what you think in the comments below. But I really do want to highlight the ramifications of what we've seen in the wake of the Vox adpocalypse and the tactic of these activists in media to target their political rivals. If you don't like the Proud Boys, by all means, you feel free to criticize them. The Proud Boys have broken laws in certain circumstances, been arrested and charged, and I've highlighted this in many videos, and they absolutely deserve to be. I completely disagree with their politics, that's fine. But this appears to me to be an activist tactic of framing a narrative to put pressure on a company, to force them to terminate the services of a private individual. The results can be pretty damning. So Mark Kern, who is Grums on Twitter, tweeted earlier, traditional journalists are gunning for YouTube in a big way this month. They're trying to get all independents demonetized. If you want to know why, it's about money. Traditional journalism is dying. Ad blocker cuts off their revenue, and people prefer to get their news, reviews, and entertainment from YouTubers and streamers. The reason I'm moving on to highlight this is because what we're seeing from Slate, in my opinion, and trust me, I think you understand why I'm saying that so much. This is very important when you look at what Carlos Maza did to Steven Crowder. Carlos Maza in the past had mocked Steven Crowder's criticism of him and said he wasn't being gay enough. But now he's upset, conveniently, on Pride Month. Carlos Maza has also advocated for deplatforming and said to do it more. And more importantly, Carlos Maza used to work for Media Matters for America. The tactic we're seeing from these people, it's the same thing in different ways. In this instance, as Mark Kern points out, traditional journalists are hurting, and so they're targeting YouTubers. This then results in collateral damage. Mr. Alsip History has received a ton of attention because he is a history teacher who is having his content removed. The Guardian notes YouTube blocks history teachers uploading archive videos of a certain World War II leader in Germany. More importantly, I want to make sure I absolutely stress this bit here. This is all kind of an addendum to the initial report I did. Stardust Vibes, who I made reference to in my first video this morning, had his channel demonetized. And I got to say, Stardust Vibes' channel is absolutely incredible. There's many videos that have millions of views, and it's very simple. This video is thunderstorm sounds by a lake house, with 4 hours of a thunderstorm by a lake house, and it's a video, and it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. People turn this on to relax, and the white noise and the nature sounds are really helpful, especially when people are trapped inside in winter months. He had his channel demonetized in the past day or so. We're now seeing, this is a follow-up on the past story. YouTube is deleting thousands of channels with videos of World War II history. Now multiple teachers are complaining that videos uploaded to educate people have been deleted. This is the dangerous nature. This is this is what happens, the collateral damage of when they target people in this way. This is what we can see. It ends up with Sandy Bacombe, I believe I'm pronouncing her name right, is a journalist who had historical video from Charlottesville that was actually used at the trial of James Fields, restricted on YouTube in response to all of what's happening here. So I think I have a lot more stories I could go through. I'm not going to because this video is already going very, very long, so I'll leave it here. But suffice it to say, this is the collateral damage we see from activists in media pretending to be journalists. This is the result when you allow these big companies or when you pressure these companies. So let me stress, what we saw from April Glaser of Slate to Chase, in my opinion, increased the cost of Chase. It's a threat of negative press that could result in a stock price drop and harm to their business, resulting in Chase taking the obvious action of getting rid of the Proud Boys. Then April reported on it. The same thing happens with YouTube. YouTube terminating all of the monetization in these accounts is a direct result of activists in media continually slamming YouTube and damaging their revenue streams. Recently, we saw a story. Actually, let me see if I can pull this story up. I don't know exactly where it is, so maybe I can't do it. But there's a YouTuber by the name of Jeremy Hambley, also known as The Quartering, who recently had a journalist reach out to advertisers who had appeared on his channel, and they've claimed to have since pulled ads. A tactic in media is to target the resources of content creators, journalists, and personalities they don't like to harm their business. These are activist actions. Journalists don't need to do this. Journalists don't, the Daily Beast doxed a private individual. It adds nothing to the story. YouTube demonetizing people is the same pressure. Chase getting rid of the Proud Boys is no different than YouTube getting rid of Crowder and others. The rhetoric will continue. I'm sure they're going to direct all of the ire in the world at me because I reported on this and because I acted in defense of the right to people like Crowder to have demonetization. They'll make all the claims in the book about me by all means, but you know what? You got no leverage on me because I'm sorry. I just don't care. If everything in my life was gone, I'd go chill on the beach and listen to nice lake sounds. That is inherently a problem for them. They try to use the threat of cutting off financial services to harm people, not necessarily to hurt the individual or scare them, but to actually shut down their business. It's entirely possible this video will be brigaded for a variety of false flags because I have kind of pulled pulled back the curtain and shown you activists in media absolutely do this. It is not a conspiracy. It happens every day. The Southern Poverty Law Center has recently been in turmoil because they're known to have been an extremely racist and sexist organization. I believe the CEO and the president stepped down because of the controversy. And it was around 20 years ago that this information came to public light. But for some reason, people care about the opinion of this organization. I could use any organization's opinion to accuse anyone of being any group. I believe this only serves to be a pressure to damage the business of political rivals. So there you go. This isn't the only document I received. I want to stress that. However, I have not been able to confirm the authenticity of other communications, which I believe make a way more damaging picture, but I'm not going to release or comment on the contents of because Chase has refused to confirm or deny. So we'll leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. You can follow me on Minds at Timcast. Stay tuned. I'll have more segments coming up at youtube.com/TimcastNews starting at 6 p.m. If I receive a comment from Slate, in the meantime, I will add an addendum to the story, and I will include their statement. However, they didn't get back to me soon enough. I have to record the video, edit, and upload. It was my intention to include their statement. So in that regard, I apologize it wasn't included in the story, but I will do my best to make sure the context of their statement will be included to contrast my personal opinion on this matter. I will end with one final thought. In terms of minimization of harm and the revealing the name of April Glaser, as I stated early on, I think it's important to look at the articles she's written, in the context she's written them, and the statements she's made on YouTube so you understand her position when it comes to deplatforming and restricting speech and how that plays into the culture war as a whole and why I believe that she was absolutely trying to harm the business of the Proud Boys. Again, I don't know. This has been much speculation on my part. One final thought just for posterity. This email was confirmed to me on two different email chains by Chase, as well as the contents being referred to directly by Slate's PR individual. I'll leave it there. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all in the next video.